What is up, fantasy people? You are back with the True North Fantasy Pod, presented by Monkey Knife Fight. I am Travis Seal, coming live from Dirty Laundry Studios 2.0, and of course, with me co-hosting, West Coastin', bringing the most. It is Tyrell McLaughlin. What is cracking, playa?
Living the dream as always.
Absolutely, buddy, as am I. Of course, just want to mention, anybody listening, please go to the YouTube channel. We are live on the TNFF network currently. Go there, make sure you subscribe, hit the little bell icon if you want to get them noties. And follow us on Twitter at TrueNorthFFB, and of course, our recently launched website at TrueNorthFFB.com would be very much appreciated. And this pod, the True North Fantasy Pod, we are proud members of the Fantasy Points Media Group, where you can get elite resources, tools, analysis from some of the best in the biz. Friends of the show, Scott Barrett, Joe Dolan, Graham. So go there, get 10% off the top. Even just a snapshot, go to Ty's timeline, and Ty was dropping some heat that was all derived from fantasypoints.com today. So some really good stats and lots of good research that can be done. And some of the best articles that you can find anywhere on the entire internet of any genre. Loving working with them, and it's been a blast. Good stuff you were putting out today, Ty.
I couldn't pleasure's all mine. You know, I love tweeting out the stats and everything, and Fantasy Points is like really stepped up to the plate when it comes to providing some stats.
Yeah, man, it's been a great partnership and fun to be able to use those tools and whatnot. So tonight's episode, we're moving into week 3, and we are excited to get the people ready for that. We are going to be talking a little bit about some stuff that happened in week 2. There was a bit of an injury apocalypse this week, Ty, especially at the quarterback position. So we're going to talk a little bit of aftermath of that and talk about, who's left behind after the rubble, and figure out where we want to attack some of these teams, if we don't want to attack any of them at all, or if it's time to pounce. After that, we're going to get into, of course, a little segment of trend spotting, as we are one to do a little bit of I Got 5 on it with Monkey Knife Fight and get into some of their stellar player prop games in there. And then we're going to talk about some robust wide receiver rooms and talk about some of these groups where there's multiple players producing and whether they can sustain that throughout the rest of the season. So I think we got a lot on the docket tonight. Ty, you ready to pitter patter?
Yeah, it sounds like we better get at her.
We better pitter patter and get at her. All right. So yeah, we're going to start off with the injuries. I guess that's kind of a big topic. Waivers ran yesterday for most leagues, and it was pretty hot and heavy trying to recoup at the quarterback position. Some super flex teams are absolutely tanked right now, and we're going to start with one of the guys who is a part of that Thursday night. Well, who was supposed to be a part of one of those Thursday night matchups, and that'd be Tyrod Taylor of the Houston Texans. They, of course, play the Carolina Panthers tomorrow on Thursday night, but they will be doing that with Davis Mills at the helm as opposed to Tyrod Taylor. So it's going to be an interesting shift for a team that 12 months ago was trotting out Deshaun Watson, and now they got poor Davis Mills going in there to try and keep the ship afloat, because these Texans have looked pretty frisky with Tyrod. So it's kind of a damn shame for the team. But what are you making of the Texans with Davis Mills? Is this a full avoid, or do you think just volume can sustain, or what do you make of it, man?
Yeah, I mean, since the preseason, I think we've both been advocates for Tyrod, yes, at cost, absolutely, and Brandon Cooks is very undervalued, and we've already seen Brandon Cooks with multiple 40-yard receptions, which, his skill set aligned pretty good with Tyrod Taylor's. So normally you would kind of downgrade Brandon Cooks a little bit when it comes to losing the skill set that Tyrod brings, because he does have a pretty sweet treat deep ball. But, Nico Collins is also gone for a little while as well. So that's the other kind of deep threat. And I believe Danny Amendola is going to miss this game too. So, there's a lot of market share to be had when it comes to a team that's likely going to be trailing in this game. in Houston. So I still really like Brandon Cooks. I think he's still the one guy you can start and maybe comfortably this week even. But other than that, it's definitely an avoid. I mean, we are seeing Patriots 2.0 in that backfield there. Mark Ingram's definitely getting the lion's share of touches, but he's at like 3 yards per touch, which is like Frank Gore. So yes, avoiding almost everything in another Thursday nighter without a starting quarterback, this time the Texans.
Yeah, it was already kind of a hard offense to decipher because it's kind of a bunch of dumpy looking pieces on it. And yeah, just like you said, that backfield is really tough. I actually had to start David Johnson in a league last week, and I thought it would be okay because the game script, them getting down against the Browns and him potentially getting some receptions, but that did not necessarily go my way. And so it's definitely an avoid. I think like if we want to zero in on maybe somebody to get for free out of this team, because I do like your take on Brandon Cooks, and I think volume will mean he's just fine. I've been keeping my eyes on Pharaoh Brown, one of their tight ends. Now, he didn't have much work in week 2. Jordan Akins kind of took that mantle, but Pharaoh Brown is one of those really athletic tight ends, and he soaked up some targets in week 1 with Tyrod. So I think with a team that's playing a lot of 12 personnel, I think he's going to be on the field quite a bit. I think he has outsnapped Jordan Akins in both games, actually 73% snaps in week 2. So he's still out there, and he's an athlete. And like you said, Nico Collins is down, so Davis Mills is going to have to throw to somebody. And I think aside from Brandon Cooks, I might be looking at just going for the freebie in Pharaoh Brown as kind of a tight end option, mainly for, I guess, your tight end premium leagues, because he's not doing much for a start one tight end league, but someone to keep an eye on, that is for sure.
Maybe your boy Chris Connolly comes out in this one.
Buddy, don't play with my heart. I see him on waiver wires actually, and like I don't want to be like a homer for him, and so I'm trying to shy away a little bit just because I don't want to buy into that dumpy situation. But when I see the name on the wire, it is very tempting, Ty, because Chris Conley is my boy. We're gonna go into maybe a younger quarterback, obviously, than Tyrod, somebody who a lot of people had a lot of hope for this year, and that'd be Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. Fractured ribs. He's not going to start Sunday. I saw a timeline that for full heal, we're looking at like 4 to 6 weeks for Tua, and I believe they did put him on the IR, Ty. What do you make of this team with Jake Brisket, Jacoby Brissett in there? He has held offenses up before, and there are a lot of great pieces on this offense. But I don't know. Is this like maybe even like a lateral move? Because Tua wasn't really like putting up crazy numbers with these guys.
Yeah, well, going back to the offseason, we definitely had a hard time deciding whether this team is going to be a pass first team or a run first team. And I think the one thing we kept coming back to is how poor the offensive line is. And that has really come to bear this season. So I think the offensive line sucks in Miami. There's no other way to put it. And that is really going to put whoever's at quarterback under duress quick. And I think, Myles Gaskin has also allowed the most pressures per PFF. So I think it's a really hard team to trust right now in the passing game. And then you do have a bit of a committee going on in the backfield as well. So outside of Jalen Waddle in like a pinch, I don't think I'm really looking to start anybody from this offense, which is a far cry from, just 3 weeks ago entering the season with this Miami offense.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like it was, there was little positives you could draw when Tua was in there, but it's just such a crapshoot with Jacoby Brissett coming in. And like, I think maybe in a couple of weeks when we see it shake out, when we maybe see him find his favorite target on this team, we might be able to zero in a little bit. But like you said, I think Jalen Waddle is kind of so far the most do-it-all option in this offense, who they're giving him short targets. He's getting a little bit of deep work. Will Fuller's coming back too, but I think Jalen Waddle's still going to be involved. So I really like that as well. Maybe a little bit of Mike Gesicki because Jacoby Brissett has been good for tight ends previously in Indianapolis, but Mike Gesicki's a little bit different. Jack Doyle's kind of your inline type of guy, where Mike Gesicki's essentially just a big wideout. So that remains to be seen, but it's definitely a hard situation to buy into. I think it probably does play into the run game a little bit more. So I might be a little bit more staunch on Myles Gaskin getting some more of that work and the safe checkdowns and whatnot, but it's still a crapshoot, man.
I think the floor is what I think after that Bills fiasco is what we're worried about all of a sudden in Miami. Yeah, that low floor. Even Jalen Waddle, really excited to see him last week, and then he comes out, muffs a punt, just doesn't really deliver much for you, but definitely a guy that you can see they are trying to get the ball to, and a guy who's really electric out there.
Yeah, that's was definitely a stinker for Miami putting up a zilcher against the Buffalo Bills. So, hopefully they can settle in and be, because they were looking like a pretty exciting up and coming offense as well. So I kind of want to see that for some of these pieces, but there's no party in the city where the heat is on in Miami right now with Tua going down. So we're going to move on, Ty. We're going to get into the team that beat the Texans last week, and that's the Cleveland Browns, because there's a lot to unravel here, actually, not just the quarterback position. Baker Mayfield got dinged up during the game. It looked like a shoulder issue. He was hanging his shoulder real low, but he's going to be good to go this week. I think the biggest news is Jarvis Landry going on IR. This team is totally depleted in the wide receiver room with Odell still not yet back. There is some optimism he might come back this week, but I'm almost at a believe it when I see it type of situation. So what do you make of this offense in Cleveland, Ty? Are you zeroing in on the passing game, or are you just piecing it out?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to wait and see right now. I think it is going to be heavy tight end market share until OBJ is back playing 70+% of the snaps, which I think could be this week. I think OBJ, when he is back, essentially operates as that shorter average depth of target guy now, because Jarvis Landry is on the shelf, right? And I'm sure he could actually, OBJ could probably carve out a monopoly, quite the monopoly in this offense, huge target share, end zone targets maybe, but we have to ask, what is that worth in this offense, right? Cleveland has been a very slow paced offense so far through 2 games, and looking to run the ball half the time, or about 45% of the time. And then that tight end complex is definitely at play. Only 3 teams have targeted their tight ends 30% of the time or more after 2 weeks: the Broncos and the Raiders at 35%, and the Cleveland Browns, who've thrown the ball 46% of the time to the tight end position. So that is record-setting stuff. We won't see half the team's targets at the end of the year going to the tight end position or anything, but I just think so. OBJ will curve that significantly whenever he is back. Before he is back, maybe we do continue to see pretty crazy tight end market share with those 3 guys. But Baker does like himself some tight ends, so those tight end targets aren't really going anywhere. Eventually, it should be about 30%. Plus, the scheme, it just demands a lot of tight ends to be on the field, and if they don't. One of the things is Cleveland doesn't really look like one of the best teams in the AFC like we thought they might. And that might cause them to be in these game scripts where they're actually throwing the ball closer to 55 to 60% of the time. And maybe they're forced to play a little bit faster. And I think OBJ could definitely, when he is back, live up to expectations as a wide receiver 2 or whatever, with the amount of opportunity that could be up for grabs in that scenario I just painted. But even thinking about those tight ends again, they're probably going to see 1/3 of the targets. For fantasy, it's being split among 3 guys. So there's not much interest identifying a guy like Austin Hooper. He saw an increase in his snap share in week 2 and route participation, but Njoku's the one who's also playing a lot of snaps and seeing a huge average depth of target in comparison. And then you have Harrison Bryant. And he's kind of a dynasty darling, and should be, because of what he can bring to the table. So all of that, I guess, Trav, is to say OBJ's value could be okay, could jump the shark a little bit. And I think this all also maybe means the targets won't really be there for the guys who are at the position group that we actually like in Cleveland, the running backs. I like Kareem Hunt. I love Nick Chubb. And, it's kind of frustrating because I still think Nick Chubb is an RB1, a back-end RB1, Kareem Hunt RB2. Which might be more of a reflection of the state of the running back position just 2 weeks in already. But I do think going against the Bears, I'll rank Nick Chubb as an RB1, back-end RB1, and Kareem Hunt's going to be a back-end RB2. And that's because the Browns have scored the most fantasy points at the running back position. Even in full PPR, the Browns are number 1 by a wide margin after a couple weeks. And it is a lot on the back of touchdowns. Cleveland has 5 rushing touchdowns in 2 games already. No other team has more than 3, 6 total running back scores. No other team has more than 4, which is to say the Browns running backs aren't going to combine for 50 plus touchdowns this year. So you don't always love relying on touchdowns, and the other thing is there is probably going to be some inconsistencies. Week 1 was Kareem Hunt, week 2 was Nick Chubb, but I just don't think we have the luxury to be very picky when it comes to the running back position in fantasy right now. So this week against Chicago, basically any week, Nick Chubb RB1, back end top 12 guy, Kareem Hunt, attractive RB2, I guess. And I think Kareem Hunt should just be getting used more in the passing game, whoever that needs to come at the expense of.
Yeah, well, I think this is the opportunity for it not to come at the expense of anybody, right? Because I'm looking at it right now, and Kareem Hunt's only got 3 snaps out of the slot so far. So I expect that to probably go up a little bit, and him or Nick Chubb to be on the field a decent amount together. So I do think there could be a little bit of a boost in receptions for Kareem Hunt, but my biggest takeaway is those tight ends. I think David Njoku is going to become maybe not a focal point, but he's going to become a big part of whatever passing offense this team is fielding. So I do like the tight ends as kind of lower end options that could put up decent weeks for you. And we could see both of them do it in the same game potentially. So I like that. It's just the running backs off this offense, dabble in a little bit of the tight ends. But Ty, if there's a gun to your head and you had to pick Rashard Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Anthony Schwartz for the next few weeks, assuming, let's say, Odell isn't back, who are you taking?
Yeah, I guess this would only be something I'm entertaining in like 10% of my GPP lineups, like in big DFS tourney settings, like as a dart throw almost. So in that instance, I'm always going to go with the highest upside play, and I think that is Anthony Schwartz. I've liked how he's been used. Demetric Felton is somebody who definitely cuts into the similar kind of work that we would hope to see Anthony Schwartz getting. But, they invested a 3rd round pick in Anthony Schwartz, much higher than a lot of people thought he would get selected in the NFL draft. So quite like Anthony Schwartz as a talent. He brings that element to an offense that can be the vertical slot element. He can take an end around to the house. So he has one play to make your day kind of upside. And I think that's what I'll chase over someone like Donovan Peoples-Jones, who is definitely a better option in a 50-50 ball or whatever. And maybe a better bet to score a touchdown in a high point total game. But yeah, give me Anthony Schwartz, gun to my head, in the rarest of instances.
Yeah, no, I like it. I might lean a little bit towards Donovan Peoples-Jones just because of the snaps he's been getting. Looks like he's kind of ahead of obviously the rookie and Anthony Schwartz in that regard. And I think he brings like a decently versatile skill set to the table, where Anthony Schwartz is a little bit of like just a deep threat at this point. So, but I like both actually, not to be big players in a fantasy roster, but I like both players as kind of talents. So it's going to be interesting to see them get their shot. And hopefully for them, they can carve out that role, because this team doesn't have a lot of wide receiver depth as we're seeing right now. So somebody's going to have to step up. Okay, this one's super weird, Ty. It's, the former quarterback of my Birds, Carson Wentz, playing with the Indianapolis Colts. 2 sprained ankles in the same game. Obviously, he had the ankle issue in the preseason, but I think Stoner put out a tweet earlier this week about a lady walking in some high heels and just not being able to do it, and her ankles are just busted in the high heels. And he said, "Carson, is that you?" or something like that, which I thought was pretty funny, because 2 sprained ankles seems pretty rough, and they haven't actually ruled him out yet this week, but you have to imagine that he's not going to play this week, or else it's going to be a pretty rough one. What are you thinking? Like,
I definitely don't think he goes this week.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't even know if he goes this week. Like, it sounds like a high ankle mechanism with at least one of those ankles, unless we forget that Wentz was, he missed most of the summer rehabbing, from ankle surgery, from ankle surgery. This guy is a walking car wreck. Like, if I'm a Colts fan, I'm also just worried about, their offense staying competitive against the Titans this week it's really trippy to think about. Like, I think Derrick Henry, AJB, and Julio, led by Ryan Tannehill, like, they could keep the ball rolling on offense against the Colts defense as well. Like, I really don't like this matchup for them this week. I don't like their defense right now either. Like, even the Colts defense just doesn't look like it did last year. Exactly. And it's such a unique system that, it's kind of concerning, even though it's only been a couple weeks. And, it's not like the Titans defense is good either. And I'm not a believer in the Titans, ability to generate pressure at all. But even with the Titans being like comfortable favorites in this game this week, Vegas doesn't think like the offense is going to be good for the Colts. So I think the point total is like 47 or 48. And I just don't trust Wentz to have the ability to stay inside the confines of an offense. You know what I mean? Like, why doesn't he just try and sit there and do what Phillip Rivers did in this offense last year? I don't get it, but Wentz wants to move around and escape the pocket. Problem is, he always gets hurt when he does it, right? Like, he plays like Big Ben Roethlisberger, but he's just more fragile, and he's not built like Big Ben. Like, Big Ben is built like a rugby prop, you know what I mean? Like, he is just big and can handle guys dragging off him. But I don't know, it's frustrating because you don't know what to do really with this offense now, despite, the Colts. I just think they really screwed up this offseason when we were talking about how poor this offense could end up being. And we're kind of seeing that manifest right now. which is frustrating because Ballard's going to Ballard, I guess, but they had a lot of cap space. They sat back and watched Julio Jones go to their division rivals. So, Jonathan Taylor, sure, definitely. Titans is a good matchup too on paper, even though JT didn't fare so well last year against them. Do you want to start Nyheim Hines? I don't really want to start Nyheim Hines. Who else is even in this offense? So Michael Pittman, I guess, is the other guy that people are going to consider, but I just don't know. Like, I think Michael Pittman has upside from week to week, but I'm not sure I'm going to rank him ever as a starter. Like, the MP is probably just outside my top 36, but we are seeing, like, he probably will have a stranglehold on the targets, catches, receiving yards, especially with T.Y. Hilton on the shelf and Paris Campbell doing his thing, which is not playing after week one pretty much. Michael Strachan hasn't really done much. We kind of liked him as a deep sleeper. Even the tight end group has just been less involved than we thought. So I guess Zach Pascal would be the interesting name. All three of Wentz passing touchdowns this season have gone to Mr. Zach Pascal. And I was looking at one of those fantasy point stats is you can look at points per game in the red zone. You can look at stats just in the red zone and Nuke. Yeah, Nuke is leading the league, obviously, in points scored in the red zone, but Zach Pascal, the only other player with over 20 fantasy points in the red zone. And he's also over 14 yards per reception since 2019. Like, the guy can do it, and he also plays a lot of run blocking snaps. So they really like Zach Pascal. Michael Pittman might be the guy who has a little bit more sustainability for the rest of the season, but I'm probably avoiding everybody in this offense, even if it is Wentz under center, outside of Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I might differ a little bit just because I am kind of digging what I'm seeing from Michael Pittman. He did have that big week 2 with just over 20 points, which was really, really nice. But, that's not like exactly like you said. He's not going to be like a top 24 option for me necessarily, but I do like him as like that wide receiver 3-ish with Wentz. I think with Jacob Eason, we could see it as well for kind of the same reasons that we like Brandon Cooks, but maybe not with that kind of ceiling, just because he's kind of that option who's going to have to soak up some volume. So, that's kind of the only wide receiver I'd be going in on. But it sucks, man. This was going to be a nice little defensive matchup with Michael Pittman getting hot, Zach Pascal looking good. I think we even saw a couple of flashes from Jack Doyle. I will say that. But I think that is going to be no more with Jacob Eason. And the only ones would be, like you said, JT and maybe a little bit of Michael Pittman for myself, but I'm not hugely buying in there. Okay, you want to talk about torch and shit? Let's talk a little bit of Derrick Carr, buddy. Never thought we'd say that, would we? Huh?
Yeah, league leader in passing yards.
Good thing this is recording because we actually did say that. He's looking really, really good, man. You said it, the league leader in passing yards right now. The quarterback 5 through 2 weeks, so a top 5 quarterback. Look at you go, Derrick Carr. Yeah, man, it's he's still questionable with an ankle injury right now, but he's looking like he's going to be good to go. If he is healthy, is Derrick Carr an every week start right now?
Maybe, I guess, if you want to. I just don't usually target that profile of quarterback as like a streaming option. Like, I probably missed the boat picking him up in my home leagues, and I don't have a lot of them in best ball settings or even dynasty settings or redraft settings. I just don't love the Carrs. I don't know. Yeah, what can I say? I don't start the Carr very much. So, you can, and you can hope that he has multiple touchdowns or 300 yards passing again, but I wouldn't be banking on that. He's like a Matt Ryan of old, like maybe even. So you're going to have to take the low weeks with the good weeks. Luckily, he's had 2 games against tough defenses. I'll give him credit. Like, it's 2 games we didn't expect him to win, but no, I'm not like, dropping Justin Herbert for Derrick Carr.
No, absolutely. And I think it should be said, too, that he did have an extra quarter of play with that overtime game against the Baltimore Ravens. So, he did put those stats up. I'm not taking that away from him, but he did have, a little bit of extra time to do so. And they were trying to come back in that game. So, I think he's just kind of a streamer plus for me as well. You know what I mean? He's a good little option, even in bad matchups sometimes, because if they get behind, he's going to throw. And this run game is absolute garbo. So that's kind of their only avenue to score some points. So with the fade on that run game and, Darren continuing to be Waller Bills, what do you make of the wideouts here, Ty? We had that big Bryan Edwards game where everybody was just banging pots and pans on social media because it finally came to fruition in week 1. And then last week we had a big Henry Ruggs game, which I like to see myself. Are you on team Ruggs or on team Edwards as far as a wideout to slot in as, say, your wide receiver 3 or a flex or whatever in your lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely team Henry Ruggs for that simple reason. I always talk about like what I'll lean into the higher upside play. I want to lean into the variance here, buy the volatility. I think, especially when you're talking about like a floor versus ceiling debate at your wide receiver 4 or 5 position, because my answer would definitely be neither. If it's who am I starting this week, it's neither. The wide receiver 1 is definitely Darren Waller, as you mentioned, because truthfully, Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs won't even be like wide receiver 4s in my rankings. I don't think. Like, I doubt either crack my top 48 wide receivers because it is kind of a tougher matchup against Miami this week. But yeah, you mentioned the run game. It looks like Josh Jacobs will be out for week 3 again, right? So Drake is that's the other thing. Like, Drake's been left in a pass block a lot more than I thought. And yeah, I think, and the other thing is like the Raiders have won 2 games that we didn't, we kind of assumed they would lose. So the game scripts have been hard to predict as well. I would still just bet in this offense on Walla Walla Bing Bang and nobody else, though, to be honest.
Totally. Yeah, the over-under is 45 in that game against the Dolphins. And I think their strength as a defense is as a passing defense, and they could be had a little bit in the run game. But this team doesn't have a run game, so it's an interesting matchup. I'm also team Henry Ruggs. If anybody tuned into our last episode right before week 1 started, Henry Ruggs was one of my final sleepers for 2021. Just because, that draft capital and the potential to be the wide receiver 1 for an NFL team with that speed and upside that he can bring. I think that's a nice play. I think he probably would fall into my top 48. I don't know where he is right now. I will admit I have some work to do on my rankings tonight, but I think I might have Henry Ruggs within that top 48.
And just like off the top of my head, like I don't like saying that and then not giving guys I would start over them, not everybody, but I would start someone like Christian Kirk over him. I'd start Jalen Waddle. We just talked about that's somebody I'd start over him. So there's definitely like, I just don't see DJ Chark, all the Jaguars guys, even if LaVisca goes, I think I'm starting over him. Darnell Mooney. There's a lot of people that I'd start over either Raiders wide receiver.
That's interesting. I don't think I would do Mooney, but I do like the Kirk take because that Cardinals offense is looking really good for all the wide receivers that are in the place. Another veteran quarterback, Andy Dalton. He blew a tire this week, Ty. He's got a knee injury and he will not start this week. And it has been announced that finally Justin Fields is going to get the start in week 3 against the Cleveland Browns. We're super, super excited to see him out there.
Send him to Ohio.
Yeah, absolutely. Send him home to where he's familiar so he can go out there and ball. He looked pretty good in relief work last week. We talked a little bit pre-show talking about how he was dropping some dimes, and Allen Robinson had the dropsies on one that would have been a touchdown. But with Justin Fields in there, are you upgrading any of these pass catchers? Because Andy Dalton was kind of dealing before that injury too. Do you think it's an upgrade? Or do you think it's similar? Or do you think with him maybe running the ball a little bit more, it might be a downgrade for these pass catching weapons in Chicago?
I don't know. It's really tough to put it in like a black and white term. I think there's more like weekly upside to be captured, but I don't think like when we look at it at the end of the season, there's going to be much of a difference whether it was Dalton or Fields because they both add and subtract in different ways. I think Allen Robinson definitely benefits. He was a wide receiver 2 though, and he probably remains a wide receiver 2 for your fantasy roster, you know what I mean? Or top 20 guy in your rankings every week. I just think with Fields, there's going to be some ups and downs, right? And we even saw that in his limited showing last week. Like we saw some big plays, some, really well delivered balls. One to Allen Robinson, dropped it in the end zone. Like, come on, Allen Robinson, help your quarterback out for once in your life. Like, what's that? But yeah, I think for fantasy, like we should rarely expect a quarterback who's a rookie to support multiple options in the passing game. So that's where it gets tough for me because beyond Allen Robinson, we all like Darnell Mooney quite a bit. But I'm not sure this is a big win or a move that like elevates him into a range where we're starting him every week. You know what I mean? I'll still have him closer to that wide receiver 4 range. But yeah, there's definitely like, I see the argument for Darnell Mooney being a big winner in this situation. I get it. Like he leads the team in air yards after 2 weeks. He's tied with Allen Robinson in targets. I just expect those scales to tip further towards Allen Robinson if the offense, especially the passing game, shrinks a little bit. Allen Robinson just hasn't had the hottest start yet. And I expect a big blow-up game any day. For now, with Mooney, thinking about if I would start him in fantasy and like home leagues and stuff, only if you're desperate, I think. I'm like, he's in that tier with like a Michael Pittman, you know what I mean? Or a Tim Patrick or Patriots wide receivers and stuff like that. But I think the big winner here is Justin Fields owners, right? Because I expect him to use his legs a ton. And I think David Montgomery gets a little bit of a boost, and, maybe Cordell Patterson hype cools down a little bit. But yeah, Justin Fields is definitely the big winner here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I got a home league of ours, Ty, that's got Justin Fields waiting in the wings, and I'm gunning for the repeat in that bad boy. So I was very excited to hear the news this week that he's coming in there. And I might disagree a little bit, because I think I would probably put Ruggs maybe a tier above the one that you described, just because I think it can kind of turn into this situation where, yes, maybe the target volume does move towards Allen Robinson a little bit, but Darnell Mooney he continues to be one of those guys that only needs one or two plays to get a good fantasy week for the roster. And I think Justin Fields has a bit of a penchant for throwing down the field. And so I think that's kind of conducive to maybe more fantasy points on less volume is kind of where I'm coming from for that. So I think there's going to be enough passing volume, and I think it can turn into a funnel to just those two guys and maybe a little bit of Cole Kmet, just enough that both of those guys could be nice for fantasy. So I'm digging the Bears offense, and I think they're ready to turn a little bit of a corner here. And it's just going to be fun to see, right? I think we got all five rookie quarterbacks are starting in the NFL, or except for Trey Lance, actually.
Not Lance, my boy.
I am sorry about that. And actually, that was that's where we're going to go next. Let's talk a little bit of San Francisco, because I think it's going to be very, very pertinent to get this team right, because there is a lot of uncertainty going on there that's got a lot of teams reeling for fantasy football. So obviously your boy Trey Lance, he didn't have any snaps in week 2 after coming in, throwing a touchdown in week 1, and then going back for a margarita and putting his feet up for a little bit. But I think he'll get his chance to get in there. The team's not looking very good. Jimmy Garoppolo has been very mixed for fantasy football. The backfield is an absolute mess. And I think that's where we need to kind of zero in on first, Ty, because if we just kind of run down, Jeff Wilson is still on the pup from earlier in the preseason. Raheem Mostert gone for the year. JaMychal Hasty is week to week with a high ankle sprain. Trey Sermon in concussion protocol after his one and only career carry went for about 10 yards. He got hit in the bean and he's got a concussion, so he's probably not gonna play this week as well. Even Elijah Mitchell, the last man standing, did get a little bit banged up with a shoulder injury, so we'll see how that goes for him, but it looks like he's probably going to be the guy that's good to go. They signed something called a Jacques Patrick tie. And I think today they actually signed Chris Thompson as well, the scat back extraordinaire.
Yeah,
so definitely interesting additions to the team. They also brought in Lamar Miller, Randy Duke Johnson, and TJ Yeldon for visits yesterday. So, I mean, they're looking. It's hard to see them going forward with just Chris Thompson, Jacques Patrick, and Elijah Mitchell. But I just want you to make it make sense for me, please.
Well, they have Trenton Cannon there as well.
Right,
and
that's
they
right.
have, I guess, what's his name? Kerryon Johnson probably is unlikely to be active on game days or even promoted at this point. Because Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell could go. Elijah Mitchell should be able to go against the Packers. And should he be able to go, I think he is kind of in line to see a big portion of the work, maybe. The thing is, he could serve as like a 3-down role in the short term, you know what I mean? Or the other thing is like kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, because he's banged up and the 49ers love their committee approach. Maybe they limit him, right? Which leaves the door open for one of those mystery box guys to kind of capture the hot hand that we know people can capture in the Shanahan run game. So as always, we want to be attached to this run game, like you hinted at. And I think there's even running back targets to be had, so long as it is Jimmy G under center in San Fran. So if Elijah Mitchell goes, I think he's like an RB2 or a flex play, just to put that out there against the Packers this week. I think Trenton Cannon deserves to be like ranked, you know what I mean? Because he's probably the name to know. He can play the Raheem Mostert role. He actually kind of reminds me of Raheem Mostert. And if both Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon miss week 3, like Cannon is definitely a sneaky flex play at the very least. Like you mentioned, they signed Chris Thompson, which, I think he could step into the JaMychal Hasty role pretty easily, at least in the passing game. Like maybe not a couple goal line carries or anything, but he is familiar with an outside zone run scheme. So that makes Kerryon, like we were saying, probably a guy who doesn't get called up and depressing that Duke Johnson wasn't the guy that, or even TJ Yeldon. Yeah.
Totally.
But no doubt that any of those names can be high efficiency backs in this system against the Packers, who have given up a lot of efficiency to the running back position over the last year and a half. So yeah, this shows me, in my opinion, like what they wanted to replace too, because by midseason, I'm expecting Trey Sermon should be good to go in theory.
Yeah, totally.
But also Jeff Wilson will be back, right? So Hasty's, who's probably back, that's the role they want to replace right now, that pass catching back. And yeah, I think that's what the 49ers are adding to the roster heading into week 3. And then Trenton Cannon steps into a role as well. So we should continue to see a committee going forward. Maybe I'm using this, like, stash Jeff Wilson on your IR.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I would buy Trey Sermon right now. I'm definitely using this as an opportunity to buy Elijah Mitchell if I can for RB, like 2 flex prices. But another component to the 49ers looking for a pass catching back is that Elijah Mitchell has not been cutting it when he's left in the block. Like, he's been one of the worst running backs in pass protection in 2021, according to PFF. So that would be the one caveat I would offer, where I'm not sure how much we should buy Elijah Mitchell high, I would say. I'm still banking on someone like Trey Sermon or somebody really carving out that early down role by the time they enter that extremely advantageous fantasy football playoff strength of schedule in San Francisco.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's a little trickier to buy in for me, just because of like the level of guys that they have and how many bodies they're having to circulate in there. I think, like you said, like, I think I'm just looking at the guys that are going to be there down the stretch, and that's Jeff Wilson and Trey Sermon. I like Elijah Mitchell, and I think he's going to be in there. I don't think I would buy him at the prices you're going to have to pay for him right now, because people are going to be trying to capitalize on that running back 2 price, and I don't think he's going to have the longevity for fantasy that will make that necessarily worth it for the long term. But I definitely see that as risking it for the biscuit, because this is a running game that's going to have somebody have a big game every single week. And I guess for the foreseeable, it looks like it's going to be Elijah Mitchell. So there is some merit to that. I just don't think I would be kind of coughing up the dough for that necessarily. Jeff Wilson's the guy.
That's a move you make if you're like 0-2, right? Like, that's the kind of move that I'm making if I'm 0-2 and people are sitting Elijah Mitchell. I'm going to grab him, hope he blows up against the Packers, and that he is a bona fide RB2. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But if you're 2-0, it's definitely a move you could trade him away if you wanted to if you could get RB2 prices. Yeah, for
sure. And if I have him, I'm probably trying to trade him away, just because I think with the running back landscape, it's going to be hard to find a team that's sitting him at this point if that owner has not been living under a rock for the last couple of weeks necessarily, right? So I think, it's definitely one to buy into, and I do like Elijah Mitchell for the next couple of weeks, just not necessarily for the long term down the stretch this season. But it's the pieces below him are cheap. So if you want to go and take that shot, there is a chance at some spike weeks here and there. Okay, Ty. So the last backfield we're going to dive into here, and then we're going to keep this train moseying, and that would be the Los Angeles Rams. Our boy Daryl Henderson, man. He's got a rib cartilage injury, which actually is coincidentally the same injury that Cam Akers had early in last season. So it's about a year to the day when Cam Akers got that, I read today. So that was a little bit of an interesting coincidence, but that did cause Cam Akers to miss 2 games in 2020. The Rams are still optimistic that Daryl Henderson can go this week. I think it would probably be in their best interest, with a team that has title aspirations, to let him sit for a game. But what do you think about Daryl Henderson's prospects to play? And if he doesn't play, how confident are you starting Sony Michel against the Bucs defense?
I definitely don't want to start Sony Michel. Like, it's tough. The Bucs are definitely an elite run defense, right? Interestingly enough, the Bucs haven't allowed a single running back to score 20 fantasy points on them since Christian McCaffrey did so in week 2 last year. Until last week, Cordell Patterson went over 20 points in half PPR via work in the receiving game, though, right? And unfortunately, the Rams have 4 catches combined this year in 2 games to the running back position, and the Rams running backs combined for the 3rd fewest receptions last year as well. So Sony doesn't even offer a ton of upside in the passing game, like in his NFL history here. So yeah, you're kind of banking on a touchdown or 2 from Sony Michel, right? Which is definitely possible. I think the Rams and Bucs is one of, if not the highest point totals on the board this week, but I just don't think the big plays are going to be there for this Rams run game this week. Like, the Bucs have allowed the lowest yards per carry in back-to-back seasons to running backs. And check this out, Trav. Since the beginning of 2019, I want to get this right. Tampa Bay has allowed just 8 total runs of 20-plus yards, by far the fewest. Only 4 total 20-plus yard runs in 2019 and in 2020, none so far this year. So, yeah, I think Sony Michel is a downright sit this week. And to go back to Daryl Henderson, I think he should be back before long. And it's just one of those things. He got banged up in the preseason, but they still heaped all the volume on him. We were really surprised about that. So I might be using this to buy Daryl Henderson, whose injury is more of a pain tolerance issue than it is something that could linger into the season. Although, yeah, durability concerns are obviously prevalent with Daryl Henderson.
Yeah, well, I think that's the case probably with any running back, right? Running back's just a tough position when you're banging into the pile and stuff like that. So I think Daryl Henderson will be back before too long if he does sit at all. But I think if he sits that one game, I'm with you. I'm sitting Sony Michel, and it is more matchup. It is more specific as opposed to Sony himself, because in a bit better matchup, I probably would play Sony in that Rams offense, but I just think the Bucs are really going to clamp down on the run as they've done, like you said, for a very long time now. That offense is looking good against the run, and they're getting beat against the pass a little bit. So I do see Matthew Stafford continuing that work for, how about Cooper Kupp, Ty? Huh? The wide receiver 1 on the season so far. The cup is full, folks. Actually, the cup is overflowing. It's just like everywhere. Shit is everywhere, and it is glorious. And just don't even clean it up. That passing game is looking pretty good, and our boy Cooper is the beneficiary after a big week 2. Suck it, Will Harris. Oh man, yeah, Big Willie style always dogs me because he's not necessarily the biggest Cooper Kupp guy. And truth be told, Cooper Kupp is playing a little bit more of a lucrative role in 2021 than he has in years past. So that situation has changed. So I can't bag on Will too much. A couple of quick hits before we ride into trend spotting, Ty. Russell Gage is week to week with an ankle injury. He wasn't doing much though. Do you think that affects it? Real quick, do you think it affects any Falcons passing weapons?
I think it's a boon for someone like Kyle Pitts. That's for sure. I think we should be buying Kyle Pitts usage, but buy Mike Davis. That's who I'm buying right now. And I know he might have another tough week coming up, but I am definitely buying Mike Davis in the volume that he's seen. He's just experienced some really tough matchups so far.
Mm-hmm. And I think because he's not that like quintessential big name, I think you could get him at a really nice price for what he could be giving you pretty soon. I will say Cordero Patterson, though, I think this is along with Kyle Pitts, I think this could be beneficial for Cordero Patterson remaining to get some targets from Matt Ryan, because he's looked pretty solid for fantasy. I picked him up in a couple of leagues this week because I'm hurting for a running back, and so I definitely I like him in that spot there. Last quick hitter is LaVisca. You mentioned him a little bit ago here. He avoided a serious shoulder injury, so he will be back. This is a really hard passing attack to pin down, Ty, but I think it's fairly clear that Marvin Jones is the wide receiver 1 in this place. You got any parting shots on LaVisca or the Jags offense before we roll into trend spotting?
No, and it's funny. I still am just going to have all these guys in that wide receiver 3 to 4 range, all 3 of them. And it's tough because we saw one kind of exciting week in week 1 when it comes to, but that was against the Texans, right? And it was much less exciting, especially after the first fucking drive in week 2 for Trevor Lawrence and co. So goes back to what we talk about with, over just putting too much expectations on these rookie quarterbacks, and especially when it comes to how many weapons they can support for fantasy. So yeah, we saw Marvin Jones have that deep ball drawn up for him by his old buddy Bevel on the opening drive. So I think that is very nice to see for him. And I think he should be the wide receiver 1 in rankings, especially with LaVisca Chenault a little banged up. The other note, by the way, would be Antonio Brown put on the COVID list today. Definitely one to monitor.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think that was kind of well rounded up there, Ty. Before we get into trend spotting, Ty, I do want to say a word for our friends over at Trophy Smack. It's not too late to get some hardware for your fantasy leagues, and Trophy Smack is the place to do just that. You can really level up your league. They've got championship trophies, championship belts, rings. They got losers trophies. They got draft boards for draft season. And I've mentioned it on the show. I am patiently waiting for my belt to come, the one that I won in the Kings Classic League. So go to Trophy Smack, use our promo code TNFF. And what that's going to get you is with the purchase of a trophy or a championship belt. And these things are absolutely mint. You will get a free championship ring. So you can go to trophysmack.com and check them out. You get a ring with the purchase of a belt or a trophy, and it is definitely well worth it to wave that in your league mate's face. So trophysmack.com, and you can use our promo code TNFF to capitalize on that. We do have it all over the site at truenorthffb.com as well, so there's some links there as well. So thanks for that support, everybody. Go check it out, and yeah, get some W's and take home some hardware. Okay, Ty, we are going to move into trend spotting. We just got a bit of a shorty for this segment this week. Last week, we did it as kind of the meat and potatoes of our episode because after week 1, we wanted to see what trends we thought were going to continue. This week, we're each going to drop one trend, Ty, one thing that we have seen and that we think we're going to continue to see over the rest of the season. And I'm going to start, Ty. I'm stealing the thunder. I'm taking the glory, and I'm kicking this one off. I am saying Tyler Lockett is the wide receiver 1 for the Seahawks for the rest of the season, and people just need to get used to it. I will be completely honest. This was not reflected in my ranks preseason. I think I might have got a little bit caught up in that DK hype, and he was looking like he was all that and a bag of potato chips, and he still is. Trust me, he still is, because in all honesty, these guys are both top 12 options weekly and should never come out of your lineup, in my opinion. Absolutely never should come out of your lineup. But I'm firmly in the camp that Tyler Lockett's the wide receiver 1, because in my heart, Ty, and I think maybe in your heart, even though I think you are maybe have been a little bit higher on DK than I have, but in our hearts, I think Tyler Lockett has been the wide receiver 1 for this team already. Right now in the NFL, we were talking about Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp doesn't have the lead in yardage. Cooper Kupp is the wide receiver 1, but Tyler Lockett is the wide receiver 2. Tyler Lockett has the second most receiving yards to the surprising Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel, I think, has 4 more yards than
West, y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Tyler Lockett's got 3 touchdowns, and he's just barely inside the top 20 in targets in the league. So that outlier efficiency that we've been talking about for seemingly years is still in effect, with almost a perfect quarterback rating for Russell Wilson when targeting Tyler Lockett. It's Tyler Lockett, man. Deep targets. They haven't even tapped into his red zone prowess yet this season, but he does lead the league in deep targets, so he's compensating for that, and he's got 3 touchdowns to go along with it. His average depth of target, Ty, is over 17 yards right now. And if you look at DK's, his is only just over 11 yards, which you would have thought at the beginning of the season would have been flip-flop. So it's pretty cool
16,
to see that.
Just for DK really quick, because I've seen that go around on Twitter a lot. It was over 16 in week 1, and then it was under 9 in week 2. So I don't think that's like a great representation.
Very
it's like
small
a really
sample.
good example of how small samples are. Tyler Lockett, though, I think one thing we can say unequivocally is, Tyler Lockett's been one of the best values in the last half decade in fantasy football since him and Russ's connection has been built and it's been cultivating and just getting stronger and stronger, and their efficiency is nothing but historic, basically. And furthermore, I think both these guys will continue to be elite options, like we've been saying all offseason and continue to say. Like, these two combined for about 50% of the end zone targets, the deep targets, all the stuff in the Seattle offense that is already in elite territory when it comes to deep passing efficiency and touchdown rate, end zone trips, end zone efficiency. Russ is just the king, and we continue to see it, and hopefully maybe he can do it for an entire season this year and not slow down over the second half. I think these two really have a monopoly carved out of their offense that is one of the best offenses, and we should just continue to buy them. And if anybody is like saying DK is like a wide receiver 2, I think he's still a wide receiver 1. I'd be buying. If people are saying Tyler Lockett's like a top 5 wide receiver going forward, I might be selling for an Allen Robinson plus or something. I don't know, but definitely 2 guys that I would continue to start as borderline top 12 guys.
Yeah, I would actually say that, Ty, that Tyler Lockett is a top 5 wide receiver rest of the season for me right now. I think he's locked in, and I'm hoping they can just keep that going throughout the rest of the season, because we know Russell Wilson is much maligned for his second halves from time to time. But top 5 rest of the season. Lock it up, Ty.
So speaking of much maligned, my trend spotting this week is Ezekiel Elliott versus Tony Pollard. We know one thing we learned last year, I would say, is Ezekiel Elliott is in the 99 percentile, where they're a running back who is, dependent on their situation. They are not able to transcend their situation. It's just what a running back can and cannot do, unfortunately. It's the kind of the basis of running backs don't matter arguments. But long story short, I think it is time that we see Tony Pollard. I know that that everyone probably knows how big of fans we are of Tony Pollard as the talent and, just how unique of a talent he is. And, he's averaged over a yard more per carry after contact than Zeke since coming into the league. So the efficiency metrics are certainly on Tony Pollard's side, and Ezekiel Elliott has done nothing but fail in the advanced metrics departments and columns over the last year and 2 weeks now. So what say you? Is it time that we see Tony Pollard over Ezekiel Elliott?
I can't say that just yet. I mean, I think the roles that I'm seeing and stuff, not necessarily for fantasy, but I like what I've seen from Tony Pollard more than Zeke, if that makes sense. But I think the volume edge is going to remain with Zeke. And I think, he'll have the edge in those goal line carries that they could be getting. And I think he's going to be safe in that top 15 range. And I think we're still going to see a little bit of variance from Tony Pollard, just in that utility kind of do it all role, which we love for fantasy football, but I think it's still going to be a little bit hard to predict for right now. So I am totally attacking Tony Pollard, and I am playing him in a flex spot just because this offense is so high octane. But I'm at the same time, I'm not necessarily expecting a consistent 15 points a game from Tony P. You know what I mean? I'm going to be, if I take a disappointing week from Tony Pollard, I'm the one who put him in there knowing that was a possibility. But I do like both of these guys as a part of this offense. And just the fact that Tony Pollard's getting so much more work, Ty, is just so exciting to see as a receiver. He's breaking off them big runs. I like it when you're watching a Dallas game and you see a big run and then you see that it's number 20. You know what I mean? Or you're like, hey, who was that? And then it's number 20. That's dope. Mm-hmm. So I just like seeing that. Zeke's going to be that inefficient volume guy. We know that at this point, but he's kind of saved by the touchdowns. A nice little backfield we're seeing. It's a pleasant surprise.
And that's the thing is I don't really imagine a scenario where Dallas Cowboys support multiple weekly starting options out of this backfield, right? So I do think it either is an either or scenario. And right now, I'm not saying that I'm ranking Tony Pollard over Ezekiel Elliott. In fact, it's not even that close right now heading into week 3 against the Eagles. But what I'm saying is that inside the range of outcomes is Tony Pollard literally taking Ezekiel Elliott's job. And all of a sudden you have a top 12 running back on your hands in a top 5 offense. So I definitely think buying Tony Pollard at RB3 prices before he goes to RB1 prices is the move. Selling Zeke at RB10 or whatever he's ranked at in ECR this week is the move. I'd sell the shit out of him at that price. So I think Ezekiel Elliott's a guy who obviously would be really hard to trade away in like your typical home league, but I think it would be a guy like Tony Pollard's a guy you could go pay RB3 prices for and maybe get a couple oohs and ahs from the crowd, but it could really pay off. That's the moves I'm kind of making if I'm 2-0 or 3-0 heading into next week. So because it'll be too late when it eventually if that was to play out, even though it might be a lower percentage range of outcomes. So while we're on the Cowboys, actually, it might kick us into our next segment pretty well because Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb are kind of rolling right now. And we want to talk about some of these wide receiver rooms that, some of these teams that can really support multiple weapons. I said they can't in the backfield in Dallas. It's because they're passing the ball too damn much in Kellen Moore's system. So are you pretty confident in Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb as long as Michael Gallup's out being like high-end top 15 options every week?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that game against the Chargers was a little bit sobering as far as my take in saying that, yes, I do think they will be, but I think they will. The passing volume is going to be fantastic for this team. Even when Michael Gallup comes back, I think they'll be safe enough. You know what I mean? I think they might skew a little bit more towards the pass when they have all the full weapons in there. But, this is one of those passing games that I think is going to hold up multiple options because Dak loves those guys. He's shown rapport with both of them. They're both really good talents. We know Amari disappears from time to time, but I don't think you're taking him out of your lineup unless he goes in super banged up or something like that. I wouldn't be taking him. Well,
he is just on that note, he is banged up this week, by the way.
Fair point. Yeah. Okay, then. All right. No, I think I'd still be starting him. I think the Eagles defense has looked decent against the pass, but they have not faced a passing attack quite like the Dallas Cowboys yet this season. So that Monday nighter, I am fired up for it. Could be a real good game for our boy Jalen Hurts. I have loved what I've seen from him. That San Francisco game, I think, was a blip on the radar. They made some really bad mistakes that lost that game, in my opinion. I'm excited for this Monday nighter to see what the Cowboys offense does. see what the Eagles defense does and see what the Eagles offense can do against that Garbo Dallas defense. So
Cowboys defense looked good in week 2.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll give them that, but they've still
kidding.
given up quite a bit of yardage, and I hope the Eagles can capitalize on that. Total.
And even with Amari banged up into this one, like I still have both those guys ranked as top 15 wide receivers heading into this week, not unlike the Rams wide receivers we talked about, not unlike the Seahawks wide receivers we talked about. I have these guys pretty close here, Trav. What about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers? Do you think they can produce multiple top 15 guys?
I think week to week, yes, they probably will. I just think that, say you're picking a leader in the clubhouse and say my guy is Chris Godwin. I just don't know who that second top 15 wide receiver is going to be, right? So I think with that rotation, I think week to week, they probably will. But I think it might not necessarily shake out that way end of season finish, just because the way that they're going to kind of cannibalize each other from game to game. So I think they're all going to be putting up good weeks, maybe, top 36 for all three, definitely. But, multiple top 15, okay. But I think that's going to be severely to the detriment of that third guy. And I think we definitely have to factor in Gronk and how heavily he's been targeted, especially in the red zone so far. He's showing out this season in the second year with Timmy in Florida. And I think that's, we've seen that kind of affect the ceiling for the secondary wideout in this team. So Godwin's the guy that I would take out of the three right now. And I think I'd probably take Evans as the second guy to finish inside the top 15. I was going that route, but I think that might be a little bit on the fence of bold, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going to happen with Mike Evans going against Jalen Ramsey this week, but definitely a guy I'd move down the board just because they are playing the Rams, and I think Godwin as well a little bit, but definitely Team Godwin over Mike Evans right now, and AB on the COVID list, something we want to monitor because that could definitely sustain Gronk's crazy season that he's having so far. Otherwise, I'd definitely be kind of fading Gronk a little bit at, market perception, I would say.
Especially with the production in the 2 weeks, right? Yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, I wanted to know what you think about the Tennessee Titans, who have obviously two of the better wide receivers in football talent-wise in A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, but their team has produced just the 23rd most PPR points from the wide receiver position through 2 weeks. What say you with the Titans supporting multiple starting elite weapons? These are elite wide receivers in the league. Are they in fantasy?
No, I think it might be kind of similar to Tampa where we're going to have one per week. You know what I mean? Julio had a nice week. That touchdown was a touchdown. That was a touchdown that he scored that got taken back. I saw green in between his heel and the sideline, but whatever. I'm not a ref, but I have a hard time seeing it with their passing volume. And I think the thing that the feather in their cap is that defense playing really bad and giving up points. And so that could be the feather in their cap. So, top 24, sure. Top 15, like we were talking about with the Tampa guys, absolutely not. But I don't think you're really sitting either. I don't think you're going to be sitting Julio, especially say you have him as your wide receiver too. Who do you have behind him that you're going to start over him, especially in a 3 wide receiver league? You know what I mean? So I definitely think they're both. But in a 3 wide receiver league, though, you're probably going to want to put him in there. You know what I mean? Just because it's Julio Jones. So it's roster dependent for sure. But I think you're more than likely going to be having to start those guys on your team. And, maybe top 24, but not top 15 for both of them. And I think A.J. Brown still will have the edge.
No, I definitely still like A.J. Brown as a top 20 guy for sure. It's going to be almost impossible to rank him outside of that. I just think it's interesting how little they've produced at the wide receiver position so far, because Tampa Bay, we talked about, we were talking about these teams, and these guys are all top 10 in wide receiver PPR points as a team. Also in that mix is the Rams, who always are top 5 in wide receiver fantasy points produced. I think we've already talked about Woods and Cooper Kupp, but maybe touch on Robert Woods a little bit. Are you liking what you're seeing there? And do you think maybe he's a buy low guy while Cooper Kupp is kind of getting the shine?
I think he 100% is, right? Cooper Kupp has looked fantastic. And I think Robert Woods has gotten a little bit lost in the shuffle. There was that huge hype for people pounding the table with Bobby Trees as that top 12 option preseason, and then Cooper Kupp explodes and he's the wide receiver 1 overall. And, Robert Woods isn't getting much shine. So I think you definitely go out and buy low on Robert Woods. This is a team that's going to lean on the pass, especially with Daryl Henderson banged up. And we know that, for the rest of the season, they have Sony Michel as his backup, who hasn't necessarily been the picture of health. So I think they're just going to continue to skew towards the passing game. We've seen Tyler Higbee in there on a ton of snaps, but we haven't seen him commanding targets away from these guys. So yeah, I think Robert Woods is going to be absolutely fine, and you should be going out and putting feelers out there because unlike a Julio Jones, Robert Woods isn't necessarily that big sexy name, right? So I think you can kind of capitalize on that and get yourself that top 15, top 20 production for the rest of the season for a decent price to make that stretch run. So I think that's really well put, Ty. You got to go out there and buy Robert Woods.
Yeah, I just want to look at the end zone targets. So there's been 5 end zone targets between the running backs and wide receivers on PFF.com here. Cooper Kupp has 3 of them. Robert Woods has 2 of them. Both, I think, of Robert Woods were in week 1, but that's very interesting. Like, that's what we were hoping to see. We thought maybe Tyler Higbee and maybe Van Jefferson or somebody would factor into that a little bit more, but we definitely imagine this team throwing the ball more inside the 10, and Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods having a lot of room to score a lot of touchdowns with Matthew Stafford coming in. A lot of the complexes at play under Goff and McVay would be transformed into more advantageous situations for Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, and I think we've definitely seen that play out. Speaking of play out, the Minnesota Vikings have scored almost 57 PPR points per game through 2 games, so 113 and a half PPR points in 2 games from just the wide receiver position. Do you think this is sustainable? Do you think this is because of how bad their defense is? What's going on in Minnesota? And do you think Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, even KJ Osborne, what are you doing with these guys?
I think it is kind of a combination of things. I think it's a mixture of the defense being a lot worse than we anticipated them being, Irv Smith getting injured, and Chris Herndon still being the nameless man, even though they acquired him, just can't really get him going. Tyler Conklin looked decent in that first game, but you haven't really seen a ton from these tight ends or anything like that. So hello, KJ Osborne. I used some fab on him this week as somebody who's coming in there. I mean, the guy is I'm pretty sure he's got over 5 targets in both games, at least 7 targets maybe in both, but I don't have it in front of me here. And admittedly, I didn't have a ton of research time for this one, but KJ Osborne looks like the real deal. Now, sustain it season long to that level, I don't think so. I think we're going to see him kind of fizzle down into a much lower upside option. But I think for Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, it's going to continue to be wheels up. We talked about these guys before the season, Ty, that they're both going to be kind of those top 15-ish options for sure. And they're just kind of proving that to be true. So Justin Jefferson as that big yardage guy, and Adam Thielen is just raking in the red zone and the end zone already. So those two definitely. I don't think KJ Osborne keeps it up. I think we are going to, see a little bit of increased production from the run game as we move throughout the season. But that defense isn't doing the run game any favors by making them have to catch up. And, Kirk Cousins has played well too. So I think it's definitely wheels up for the top 2 guys, and flex your KJ Osbornes while you can, folks. And if it keeps going,
I'd start him over both Raiders wide receivers. I think I'd start him. They got the Seattle Seahawks this week.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
Raiders have Miami. I think I'd start KJ Osborne over both Raiders wide receivers, Ruggs and Edwards.
Interesting. I think I might do Ruggs over KJ Osborne just because he doesn't need that many plays to do it necessarily. And we did see Derrick Carr get some passing work through the air against that Baltimore defense. And I would definitely say the Baltimore defense is better than the Miami defense. So I'd go Ruggs over KJ Osborne, but definitely not Edwards. And just ride the wave of KJ Osborne right now and pop him in your flex and be happy with what he puts up for you.
Totally. And the only other team I really wanted to touch on was the Arizona Cardinals, because we talked about it last week, and we talked about how Nuke Hopkins was obviously the trustable piece. Weren't too sure about Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, or AJ Green, because AJ Green was kind of the entrenched wide receiver too. Still is when you look at usage, snaps, routes run, all this bullshit. But the problem is Rondale Moore is really special. It's just so obvious when you watch him play football. So how high is too high for Rondale Moore? What are you doing with Christian Kirk? And are we going to keep forgetting about AJ Green, as frustrating as that might be?
Yes, we are. So we can sweep that one under the rug. He did get the touchdown this past week, and that's great. But I think the upside is just not there. You know what I mean? You're just not going to get it, even versus Christian Kirk, who I haven't historically been a big fan of. I think the upside on Rondale Moore is just miles higher than AJ Green, obviously. So I think the pecking order for me is obviously Nuke, and I think it's turned now into Rondale Moore, then Christian Kirk, and then AJ Green. And the reason for that is because not only can Rondale Moore do it on the deep passing, which is where Christian Kirk's been making his hay. I think Rondale Moore can do a ton of stuff with, going in motion and taking reverses or screen passes where he just does it on his own because he's an absolute freak with his speed and after the catch ability. So I really like him in this offense. I don't know if necessarily I don't know if he's going to have that stranglehold on it just yet to where he's putting up those consistent big games for you. But I think if I had to pick one of the three to start consistently in a flex spot, it's going to be Rondale because I don't believe in that Christian Kirk production sustaining. But some rosters are in a pinch, so you could throw any of these guys in there at a flex. You would just feel really gross about AJ Green, but I'm optimistic about Christian Kirk and especially Rondale Moore.
No, me too. I have both those guys ranked as wide receiver 4s this week, and I'm probably trying to squeeze these guys into lineups because we know the upside that exists in this offense. They've scored 128.3 fantasy points from the wide receiver position, by far and away the first in the NFL right now. So I expect that to continue, and I think we've only seen some kind of slimmed, more condensed, not as spread out offense with the 4 wide and everything that we were accustomed to in the Kingsbury Kyler era. So we could see this offense, as they need to play catch up in certain games or whatever, even show us a bigger ceiling than what we've seen so far, which is kind of just makes you shudder to think. Yeah. So I want all the Cardinals wide receivers, almost all wide receivers from all those teams we talked about. I feel like I'm missing a team or two. Is there any that you can think of off the top of your head?
I got a couple in mind. Yeah. The Chargers are doing a pretty nice job so far this season. Mike Dobbs is 4th in the league in targets right now. Old Mikey Williams. So, he's doing what Devontae Parker once did and having that late breakout. And I think he looks pretty good doing it.
This week. Yeah. And they play the Chargers this week. That'll be one of the highest totals on the board.
The Chargers play the Chargers.
The Chiefs. The Chiefs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's another rake spot. And he's proving to be a little bit more than just kind of that deep red zone weapon for them. So that's nice to see for Justin Herbert, because I personally am still attaching myself to him even after that rough game against the Dallas Cowboys. The Bills, of course, they run the most 4 wideouts, so that's just kind of a no-brainer, the Bills. And I think we talked about it last week, that Emmanuel Sanders is our preferred option as the second guy. But you could get big weeks out of Gabe Davis and heavily targeted weeks out of Cole Beasley at any given time. And then lastly, the Bengals with Chase and Higgins, they're looking really good. And then Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd came back with a nice game in week 2, so that was nice to see from the Bengals.
Yeah, the Bengals were definitely the one I kind of forgot, where you think you got to think those two for sure. And the Bills are a great one. They scored the most points at the wide receiver position in fantasy all of last year. And now they have 4 wide receivers that are definitely more than capable. Obviously, Stephon Diggs in the super ultra elite territory there. But I think if you aren't buying the Bills wide receivers 2, 3, 4 deep even, you should be worried about Josh Allen and selling the shit out of Josh Allen, I guess. You can't have it both ways in that instance, I think.
No doubt. Absolutely. And I think that if I'm buying one of them, it's probably going to be Gabe Davis, just because of the ultimate upside he provides over the other guys. And I think you could get him for a decent price. I mean, all of these guys could be had for a decent price. So maybe that's just my preference for his youth. And I think the ultimate upside he can give you. But there's nothing wrong
I like him, and I like his usage for. Yeah, I like him, and I like his usage for sure. I just think he's so far and away behind the other two in Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley. And then, you have Emmanuel Sanders who has an ADOT of almost 20, and then Cole Beasley is always involved at down around the goal. And I think his ADOT's fucking 5, but so definitely on the opposite. And Gabe Davis is probably up there in the 16, 17, 18 range for average depth of target. But he's just, only running routes on 32% of his snaps last week. I think under 50% route participation on passing plays in Buffalo through 2 games. That's compared to 90% for Beasley and 91% for Emmanuel Sanders. So that's definitely less usage, and unless they're chasing game scripts, because we know they beat them pretty bad, the Miami Dolphins, and we see that Gabe Davis was only at he was running a route on less than 1/3 of the passing plays for the Bills last week in a big blowout. So that's where it's tough, because I expect the Bills to be good, and so that means less Gabe Davis, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and we saw two Bills running backs put up good weeks, which is something that we never thought we would say either. Your boy
Buy
Zach Moss
Moss
with
over
2
Singletary.
tutters. I went in on him
Singletary,
pretty
another
hard.
fumble.
I went in on him pretty hard. I think I went in with a number 1 priority in a standard 10-team waivers league, one of the home leagues that will never change. And I went in on Zach Moss because I like that. It looks like he's getting that goal line work. So I dig it, buddy. I dig it.
And Singletary had 2 fumbles in week 1. Neither of them were lost. And then last week, a bad fumble on that screen pass. So, I think Zach Moss has a lot of upside going forward if you want a running back in that Buffalo system.
Yeah, 100%. All right, buddy. Well, I think that wraps up the show sheet for tonight. It was a good one. Week 3 is going to be really exciting. There are some fun games on the slate. Make sure you tune in tomorrow night to the TNFF network, and you got to hit that subscription, and then you won't miss it. But we got our boys from the Sons of DFS, Nate and D Brown, getting ready to get you some profit on your DFS lineups. I'll admit, Ty, I dabbled into DFS for the first time ever last week, just off the hype that the Suns are giving me. I never really dabbled because I was scared for what it would do to my wallet. And it was a lot of fun. I'll be completely honest with you. It was a roller coaster of emotion because I started off hot and fizzled out a little bit late. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. So make sure you dive in there with the boys over at the Sons of DFS. And on that note, I do want to say a word for our friends at Monkey Knife Fight. We're not going to have the time to get an I Got 5 on it segment in tonight. I will put a tweet out with some of our props that we want to lay down tomorrow. Monkey Knife Fight, man. The season is in full swing. In the off season, we were diving into all the other sports they offer, pretty much everything under the sun, including they dabble in like esports, which I know nothing about. But now the football season is here. You can dive in. Tons of fun games to play. More or less is kind of the staple there. But of course, you've got there's one I played last week called Reception Collection, where you take a certain amount of players and then you put them together to hit a certain threshold of receptions in a game. They're pretty sneaky little games, so it's a lot of fun to kind of dig in a little bit. Or if you don't want to dig in, you can just kind of toss a few bucks down and stack some of that cheddar. So our friends over at Monkey Knife Fight are doubling your first deposit of up to $50. So if you put our promo code TNFF in there, you can turn your $50 deposit into a cool hundo, double your cash, and then continue to double it more by placing the right wagers down on all your entries at Monkey Knife Fight. So big thanks to them. And of course, our other sponsors, Trophy Smack, and our friends over at the Fantasy Points Media Group. Can't say enough how much we appreciate their support. Find our work at TrueNorthFFB.com, on Twitter at TrueNorthFFB. Ty, you got any parting shots for the people tonight, or you just excited to get into the action?
As always, look forward to Sons of DFS tomorrow night. I want to thank everyone in the chat as well for hopping in there tonight. I know Daniel O'Connell sounds a little Irish, but I believe he's actually from down under. I'm having a little trouble focusing tonight, and I'm a little under the weather, but I'm pretty sure, those guys are part of that down under crew that follow us. So always appreciate the support, no matter what continent you're on. Good to have the support out there. And I always wonder, like, do you think either of us would last more than like 4 hours in Australia, like out in the sun? Like, what would happen to you? Because I know
I would absolutely melt. I could not do it. I don't even like the heat that we get on the west coast of Canada here. So I could not do it in Australia, but I hear it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And anybody that I've met from Australia is a beautiful human being. I'm still not necessarily on board with trying one of those Vegemite sandwiches yet, Ty. I don't know if I can do that just yet, but I've heard it's an acquired taste. But yeah, thanks to Daniel. We really appreciate it. He's been all over our Twitter stuff, and we've been loving his work, and really appreciate the support for ours. But yeah, until next week, thank you everybody for all that support. We really appreciate it. I am Travis Seal. That is Tyrell McLaughlin. Peace.